Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, July 11th through Sunday, July 17th, 2022. This week we do have a full moon happening in Capricorn at 21 degrees, and I'm going to talk a lot more about that once we get into the day by day, just because, yeah, as soon as I saw that the full moon was at that degree of Capricorn, I was very interested and slightly perturbed because it's a very special degree. We had a major event happen there just a couple of years ago, and so there may be a little bit of a blast from the past, maybe a turning onto a new chapter with things that have started since that point happened. But I don't want to give too much of that away. I'm going to talk a lot more about that once we get to that day, to Wednesday, where the full moon happens. And if you're here and you're just interested in my take on the full moon, you're not so much interested in the week forecast, you can definitely go to the description and just jump to that timestamp. I have timestamps there, but you can jump to Wednesday. That's when the full moon happens. But other than that, we also have one interplanet changing signs. Venus is leaving Gemini and entering Cancer. So for the past several weeks, we've been more interested in desiring variety and intellectual stimulation. We've been very socially curious. So now that's going to change a little bit. Once Venus enters Cancer this week, then we're going to be more interested in what is already familiar to us. So not so much curious about trying new things, more just desiring what we've already had. So maybe wanting to spend more quality time with people we already know, with family or close friends, or Cancer is all about familiarity, and it's very sensitive and emotional. So it likes to be a little bit more private. So that's where the desire is kind of headed to once Venus enters Cancer. It also means that people with strong Cancer placements are going to be more Venusian. So that means they'll be naturally more attractive and desirable. They'll be more charismatic. For you Cancerians out there, your jokes will just land better. It's not even that you have to do anything different. You'll just be your natural self, and people will enjoy your company more. So you can enjoy that for the duration of this transit. And that's pretty much it. I wanted to say for this week, you can see at the beginning of this week right now, you're looking at July 11th at Monday, and all the planets are so scattered. I think I mentioned this before. This is something that's been true for the last month or more, and it will be true basically until November. We got a pretty good range. We got a good spread here, as you can see. I mean, there's at least something going on in each and every sign other than like Leo, Virgo, Libra on the left side. But I mean, everything's pretty spread out. So as an astrologer, I'm always looking for patterns. I'm looking to see, um, is there a big cluster, or are all the planets on one side of the chart, or are they in, one element or something? Is there a theme here? And there's not much of that going on here. They're all pretty spread out. So what that really means is, uh, pretty much regardless of your personal astrology, you're gonna have some easy aspects going on. You're gonna have some challenging aspects going on. You've probably got some squares, you've got some trines. There's kind of a healthy mix, and so things aren't really extreme right now. In general, for most people, I wouldn't expect a lot of extreme challenges or hardships. I also wouldn't expect a lot of extreme, easiness or good times either. It's just kind of a mixed bag. It's um it's about as close to like normal, whatever that is, as we get in these times really. So with that kind of spread, it's it's about as far away from intense as we can get. So that's really nice. It's a nice kind of break that we're gonna get from the eclipse season and Mercury retrograde that we experienced in May, and and then we've got some pretty wild things going on in November as well. So maybe things could be a little bit boring, but enjoy that. This is good. You can relax, refresh, maybe integrate some stuff, and get ready for the intensity that will inevitably come just around the corner, because there's always more. There really is. Okay, so let's start the week here. So starting out Monday, July 11th, we have the moon in Sagittarius, and this is a nice balance. It's very different from Sun and Cancer. Sun and Cancer, being in Cancer season, we typically want familiarity, like I talked about. We want to spend time with family and close friends. But with the moon in Sagittarius for these couple days, we're also a little bit more adventurous at the same time. So really, Cancer and Sagittarius are very different. Cancer is wanting familiarity. Sagittarius is wanting the exact opposite. It's wanting to get out of its comfort zone, try completely new things, be in a new world. So there's kind of a balance of both, maybe wanting familiarity, but also wanting to be a little bit outside of our comfort zone. And of course, it just depends on your own astrology. But we also have the moon waxing, it's gaining light. So it's approaching Capricorn where we will have that full moon. So things are are kind of steadily building up. Nothing too extreme or intense. This is, a fairly typical full moon other than certain things going on. But as for like the intensity of it, the intensity that's already beginning to build as the moon is gaining light and beginning to appear full in the sky, um, there is just a general kind of building of that energy that we'll experience day by day till we get to that full moon. But as for a Monday, I do like this. We still have, well, there's not a lot of planets in detriment, but there's not a lot of planets in domicile either. So again, like I was saying, kind of a typical day. Sagittarius, though, the moon in Sagittarius is more upbeat, easygoing, kind of carefree. So this combination of Sagittarius with Cancer kind of creates this like really charming, charismatic, magnetic energy. So really, I think it's a nice kind of casual start to the week here on Monday. We have that little bit of fire from the Sagittarius full moon to kind of get us active, get us involved as we start the week here. All right, and then Tuesday, July 12th, the moon does enter Capricorn, so that is a shift. Particularly, I think the shift from Sagittarius to Capricorn is one of the most like dramatic and sometimes jarring shifts, just because Sagittarius is um, such a happy-go-lucky sign. It wants to try everything. It wants to party, and then we shift to Capricorn, which really shuts down the party. It really does. Capricorn wants to be more serious and make sure that everything is going to work out. It's very conservative. Wants to go more with the tried and true and not be so experimental or radical like Sagittarius might. So we have this more conservative approach, and this is something that's shared between the Cancer Capricorn axis because now that's where the focus is. Moon is already stepping onto the stage. It's not technically full yet, but if you do see it in the night sky, it's going to appear pretty full. It's going to be pretty bright. So Moon is already in the sign that it will oppose the Sun in. So we're already feeling that extra intensity or that, karmic, fated things happening. There's almost like this like electricity in the air and people are more active. Children and pets would be more active because we all feel it. We all feel this energy of the moon, and the moon kind of makes us a little bit crazy at times, a little bit more active. It kind of stirs the pot. It riles us up a little bit. So we're already beginning to feel that. The moon is in Capricorn, of course, so this is a more kind of heavy energy. It's not so wild like a fire or air full moon might be, but still we have those traits or those themes of the full moon still beginning to come into play here on Tuesday. Okay, and then let's go forward to Wednesday, July 13th. This is by far where we have the most action of the week, right smack dab in the middle of the week here. So we've got the full moon happening at 21 degrees Capricorn. You can see, looks like it happens technically just after, noon Eastern Standard Time at like 1 or 2 p.m. But this is something we'll feel all day Wednesday, and even Tuesday and Thursday you'll feel kind of like a overflow of this as well. But especially on Wednesday, we have those themes that we're all familiar with full moons of, everyone's a little bit more active. There's more accidents, but there's also more, good things happening. There's more coincidences. It's fated and karmic energy, more activity. And then specifically, okay, so the full moon is happening at this very interesting degree. And why do I say that? Why did this degree stand out to me? So back in January of 2020, and as I'm saying this, think to yourself, where were you at in your personal life at the beginning of 2020? And then also, where was the world? Because a lot has changed with the world. I think that's kind of obvious. So kind of think about what all has changed. Think about how you felt, New Year's and then January of 2020. So back then, astrologically, there was a very interesting event, an event so interesting that it's got to be one of the most interesting events of our lives. And I don't care what your age is. I don't care if you're 5 years old or 95 years old. This was such an interesting event in January of 2020 that It's one of the biggest ones of your life. It really is. We had a whole lineup of different planets. I believe it was Saturn, Pluto, um, Mercury and the Sun were there. Jupiter was there, not at 21 degrees, but I think it was at 14 degrees. And then we also had a new moon happening within range of this conjunction. So we had a whole lineup of planets all at 21 degrees. The most important of which were Saturn and Pluto, because outer planet conjunctions are very rare and they trigger shifts in history. They trigger shifts in collective consciousness and historical events and trends. So not only was the Saturn Pluto conjunction shifting trends, and often Saturn Pluto conjunctions coincide with war. So in the years leading up to this, I thought there might be a war going on. I thought that the world would change. Now the world did change in a very dramatic way, right in January 2020, and then in the months and now years after that. It wasn't a war like I thought it might be, unless you kind of unless you want to get into semantics and say it was a war on consciousness, or like a spiritual war, that type of thing. But not so much a militaristic, world war or anything like that. But we did have some major changes in the world, and I don't even want to say what that is because it should be pretty obvious. But yeah, the rhyme and reason, the structure of the world, and everything's about structure with Capricorn. The hierarchy of the world, of our systems, all that has changed dramatically, and it's not just about an illness. Like, really, that of course is a big deal. That's at the root of it. That's at the core of it, and that in itself has affected many people. But it's so much more than that. Our entire society has changed dramatically. So now, we have this full moon happening at the same degree. Full moons are culminations, and so this marks going on to a new chapter, moving on to a new chapter with these changes of our society that have occurred since January of 2020. Exactly what are those changes? Exactly what chapter are we moving on to? I will be totally transparent with you and say I don't know. Astrology gives us a good idea of seeing what kind of themes we'll experience. Astrology is good for seeing, at what date will things change. At what date will we have a lot of activity or maybe not a lot of activity? I can see all that, but seeing exactly the play-by-play of what physically is going to happen, who is going to do what, that's impossible to say because you have to account for free will. And there are many different timelines where different things happen. Plus, there's like time travel and it gets really complicated. So, I mean, so I'll be honest, I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I can tell you that we're moving on to a new phase, a new chapter in terms of the changes that have occurred since January 2020. Okay, and I've been kind of racking my brain, kind of trying to dig more for you guys. I want to find more information if I can, and it's hard for me to say whether things would ramp up or kind of ramp down, I guess, if you will, and move on to a new phase. Is this a new phase of moving on, moving away from those changes back to quote normal? Or is this, moving on to a new phase, like a reinventing or a phase two? It's hard for me to say, and I wish I could. I want to dig deeper, like I said, but we are moving on to a different phase where we're kind of in a different zone now, a different chapter. Um, and I think this is maybe setting the stage for future developments that are to come. Like I said, November is going to be really big, especially financially and economically. I think a lot of us know that, even people that aren't into astrology, there's a lot of rumors and information going around about some big economic impacts that are set for fall and early winter. So this is kind of the setting of the stage of that. And this is actually somewhat small. It's just a full moon. There's not a lot of aspects going on. This full moon in itself is not intense. It's just the degree that it's happening at that is kind of like a wink. It's a signal that things are kind of changing in the background, if you will. So I'll let you kind of think about that and ruminate on that. Maybe you have access to, we all have our own experiences. We all have access to unique information. So I'm hoping that that will fit with your paradigm, and that maybe that will add to some information that you've already come across. Okay, but other than the full moon, there are, the full moon itself is not really aspecting a whole lot, so that's pretty much it. It's a full moon in Capricorn. If it weren't for that special degree, this would be a pretty run-of-the-mill full moon, to be completely honest. Full moon in earth and water signs, like this is a earth full moon, sun is in a water sign. So these are usually, relatively more grounded full moons. Yes, full moons are ungrounded in their nature, but the fact that earth and water are so involved kind of like takes this down just a notch. It adds some more nurturing energy. So this is a good time for like planting seeds or harvesting. Full moon would be usually about harvesting, but these are more grounded, nurturing energies. Um, excuse me. Both Cancer and Capricorn have to do with kind of building a home. Capricorn builds the home, builds the structure. Cancer fills the home. Both want a foundation. Both want stability. So that's what we're exploring, the dynamic between emotional stability, emotional foundation with Cancer, and then the physical, the practical foundation, maybe the structure to things with Capricorn. Capricorn also explores limitations. If you explore your limitations and your resources, usually that would be time, energy, and money, although it can be many other things as well. If you face those limitations and are very realistic and responsible with them, you can actually utilize those limitations to work in your favor. You can say, how do I, this is the most amount of energy, time, and money that I have. How do I use that to my advantage and use that full capacity? That's what Capricorn is all about. So those are kind of some of the themes that we're experiencing. Okay, and then while the full moon does not actually aspect a whole lot, we do have three other sort of minor aspects happening on this day, on Wednesday. So Wednesday is going to be by far the longest day on this forecast here. But we have Mercury sextiling Uranus at 18 degrees of their respective signs. We also have Venus at 24 degrees Gemini, trining Saturn at 24 degrees Aquarius. And then we have Mercury at 16 degrees Cancer, so earlier in the day, squaring Chiron at 16 degrees Aries. I'm not going to go through one by one and analyze each and every one of those aspects because I don't think it's necessary. The main thing that you're going to feel is the full moon. As for these other aspects, Mercury having those communications and those aspects with Uranus and Chiron kind of just means that we are very sensitive in our thinking and we're picking up on larger trends or kind of things going on in the background. So we may be, so you may come across information that is actually very groundbreaking or kind of points to some of your past traumas or maybe someone else's past traumas. You're picking up on things that sometimes mentally and sometimes intuitively today that are part of something bigger that's going on. So you may maybe just pay attention to your own thoughts and your own whatever information you're coming across because you could come across something really big today. And again, that might be I don't know, just it really varies depending on the person, depending on where these fall in your chart, on your own experience really, but you may come across something bigger that's going on in your life or in your world, in your community. And a lot of it may be kind of psychological or, with Chiron, it could have to do again with something therapeutic that needs to happen, something from the past that needs to have itself known. Maybe that's some kind of baggage or experience that you've had. Maybe it's someone else in your life, but these themes are all kind of coming up. And then with Venus trining Saturn, um, there's this, I would say, desire for social cohesion. We're wanting to be a part of something bigger. Um, but, really that's just gonna be kind of in the background compared to the full moon. The full moon is really dominating this day here. So Wednesday is a very interesting day. Most of what I described is going to be affecting kind of the background. So these are kind of long-term cycles that are changing. What you're going to experience on Wednesday as an individual, just for your individual experience for Wednesday, it's going to be a full moon. I think we're all familiar with that. More activity, more people being wound up. But the focus is not just on, let's have a party or let's just expend all this energy in this kind of big explosion or this big show. Yes, there might be a lot of kind of chaos or frenetic energy, but ultimately the focus is on building a foundation. That's what we are focused on today. Thursday, July 14th, Moon enters Aquarius. You can see here in morning Eastern Standard Time. And of course, always just adjust for your time zone, however many time zones you are away from Eastern Standard Time. But Moon does enter Aquarius, so Aquarius is still ruled by Saturn, like Capricorn. We also have Saturn in Aquarius. The Moon is approaching Saturn, so there's still these kind of grounded Saturnian vibes of being responsible and applying ourselves. We're sort of expected to be wise and focus on the future during these Saturnian transits. But Aquarius is a little bit more upbeat, a little bit lighter than Capricorn since it is air. It's a yang sign, so it's more focused on expansion a little bit. So that's where you get the more experimental, radical side in Aquarius. So that's generally where the focus is. And with Moon in an air sign again, we're wanting to be more social, more socially active, more involved with other people, with our friends, etc. We do have Mercury crossing the Sun today, so Mercury will, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. That that will happen on Saturday, but for Thursday we have Venus at 25 degrees Gemini, and it actually squares Neptune at 25 degrees Pisces. So this can be really confusing, especially for our desire and our pleasure, which usually for us, our human lives in this third dimension or whatever it is, usually Venus, ruling desire and pleasure ends up being about money and relationships. So our experience, especially with, finances, and this again, it's the more pleasurable side of finances. So it's like spending money. With heavy Venus energy, we like to spend money. We like to make money and we like to spend it. We like to, use our finances for pleasurable experiences or materials. So that's generally where the focus is with Venus in general. In Gemini, it's we're wanting new things, wanting to meet new people, get access to new people or materials that might expand the pleasure in our lives. But with this square to Neptune, there's this confusion and it's kind of jarring. A square is a tense aspect. It's kind of can cause anxiety, and especially when we're blending these two planets in Gemini and Pisces. Gemini and Pisces are probably the least structured of all of the signs, I would say. These are two mutable signs. We've got mutable air and mutable water. So these are mutable signs are very adaptable. They're not structured because they have to be adaptable to a wide range of circumstances. And with mutable air and water, these are the last two elements, so they're the least physical in nature. They're the most non-physical. They're the most imaginary or abstract. So that's where it becomes very unstructured, even more so than maybe Virgo or Sagittarius. So this would just mean that we may be very confused about what we want. What we want may look much better than it actually is. We may want things that are actually bad for us. So Neptune has to do with liquids and toxins. So we can be attracted to, drugs or alcohol. We could maybe overindulge with certain things in those areas. And it's just because our perceptions can become very skewed with this aspect, I would say. And this especially becomes much, much more relevant if you have planets around 25 degrees of the mutable sign. So maybe, 23 to 27 degrees of Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, or Pisces. You will experience this much more. You'll experience this kind of crisis of, oh, what do I want? I wanted this thing, but maybe that's not what I truly want, or maybe I want something that's not in my own best interest. Maybe I'm drawn towards something that is toxic, whether that be, a substance or maybe a person that's toxic that, is really not in your best interest. Anyone with planets at the end of the mutable signs could especially experience this, but also for the rest of us, just to a lesser extent, this may kind of come into our lives a little bit. On the plus side, with Neptune, it's so strange because a lot of the time it's really unclear. First of all, it's unclear what the problem is, and then once you even maybe figure that out, it's unclear what the solution is. And it's so weird, but sometimes you have to just kind of wait it out. This transit won't take very long. Venus is kind of cruising along, at her pace. So so really, it's hard to say. On the brightest side of this, on the if there's a silver lining, it could just be that through the confusion, you come out the other side and gain a lot of clarity. So maybe you get a little bit lost through this aspect, but by exploring maybe something that's not good for you, or maybe just re-examining your desires, that's how you can ultimately learn what is right for you. That's the best I can do. Neptune, I'm gonna be totally honest. Neptune, I would say, is I would say is the hardest planet because everyone says Saturn is hard, but with Saturn, you at least know what the problem is. You at least know what to do about it. You know what you need to do if you're being real with yourself. With Neptune, it's not that easy. There's no answer really. Sometimes you just have to wait it out, and that is very counterintuitive for me as an astrologer to say because usually I come to these things saying, how do we examine what's going on? How do we use that to learn or to improve ourselves? I tend to want to be responsible, but with Neptune, it's not that easy. Sometimes you just have to wait it out, and sometimes it's unclear. Did I even learn anything from that experience? Or, sometimes maybe at the very least, it just makes you appreciate the clarity once it does come back when the transit is done. Okay, Friday, July 15th. Moon continues to cruise along through Aquarius, which I think is nice because at the beginning of this reading, or at the beginning of this forecast, excuse me, I said that there's no real clear pattern with the planets going on. They're pretty scattered. I mean, there's always patterns, but there's not a clear dominance in one area, in this or that area. The only thing I could really see is that there is a lack of air. Other than Moon and being in Aquarius, we've really just got Venus and Gemini. Um, so so for these other parts of the week, there is maybe a lack of air, which can make things feel stifling and maybe serious or too heavy. But for these couple of days here toward the end of the week, we have Moon in Aquarius. So I think that kind of buffers things a little bit, makes it nicer. Yes, it is ruled by Saturn, and on Friday the Moon will cross over Saturn. So yes, things can be a little bit heavy, and we're very much focused about the future with Moon in Aquarius, with Aquarian energies in general, or with Saturnian energies. And yeah, that can be difficult because sometimes you have to sacrifice your enjoyment in the present in order to build something more substantial in the future. And yeah, we might not want to do that. We have to be responsible. But all that being said, this is still an air sign. It's still light and detached. It can be playful. Aquarius has that side as well. That's what a lot of modern astrologers neglect to understand. They over empathize with the side of Aquarius. It's all about experimentation and rebelliousness. And yes, there is that side of it. But there's also that kind of heavier Saturnian side as well. So really, I think Aquarius is kind of a perfect sign for the moon to be in, to kind of blend this very dynamic blending of energies that we have right now into one sign that is both conservative as well as experimental at the same time. But with Moon in Aquarius, we're again wanting to be social. We're wanting to be involved with other people. We are maybe a little bit more theoretical, so we're more engaged with like abstract or philosophical conversations. Aquarius being an air sign can get into the lesser, more lowbrow, like just talking about people and that kind of thing. Air signs do enjoy a decent amount of that as well, especially with Venus and Gemini. But Aquarius is the last air sign, so out of all the air signs, it tends to be the most wise or philosophical, if you will. Okay, and then Saturday, July 16th, Moon enters Pisces. That's a big shift, and I was just talking about how I liked the Moon in Aquarius, but Moon in Pisces is really beautiful for a couple reasons. One is because it's a very fitting sign for the Moon, I think. No, it's not. Moon is not in domicile or exalted, so technically Pisces is not a particularly special sign for the Moon to be in. But from my experience and my knowledge, I would say it's a very fitting sign for the Moon to be in. Moon is all about intuition and emotion and femininity to some extent. Pisces is a very receptive sign. It's all about intuition, psychic abilities, dreams. So they work with a lot of similar themes. I think it's a sign that is very easy for the moon to be in. And with Moon in Pisces, we can explore a side of ourselves that is more gentle, more intuitive, more psychic. So I think this works fairly well, and especially with the Sun in Cancer, this works very well because now we have a water focus. Sun is in a water sign of Cancer, Moon is in a water sign of Pisces. So we are especially interested in being creative, being artistic, being connected to our own emotion and our own intuitive intelligence. The moon will start to trine the sun, not quite yet because the sun is at the end of Cancer. But give it a day or two, and then the moon will start to trine the sun, and we'll feel very strong. We'll feel very rooted and grounded in our own emotion and intuition. So that's just something to look forward to. It's an easy aspect that's coming along. Saturday, we also have that Mercury crossing over the Sun aspect that I mentioned before. That will happen at 24 degrees Cancer. So we have Mercury unifying with the Sun, and that can actually be a kind of complicated aspect because there's two different ways to interpret that. One would be saying, oh, Mercury is conjunct the Sun, so it's super strong. We've got this energy of the Sun behind Mercury. But that's not always the case. The ancients do that, when you have any planet conjunct the sun, it's typically not visible unless it's like an eclipse, I guess you could say. But typically when you have a planet really close to the sun at all, it's not going to be visible. It's clearly not going to be visible because its light will be drowned out by the sun. It'll be overpowered. So with Mercury representing our mental energy, kind of being blasted by the intense radiation and light of the sun, we can be prone to mental burnout with this aspect. So I would just say on Saturday, it is nice that it's happening on a weekend, I think. So if you can relax more so, this weekend to me looks more about relaxing. It's not a more active weekend. I mean, first of all, we've got this water focus that I already talked about, Sun in Cancer, Moon in Pisces. Water is like the ending phase. Water is, of any element, I think water is the element to really rest and reflect. That's why Cancer is more about family and close friends. It's not about expanding and branching out. It's more about kind of keeping it inner circle, keeping it closed, being especially focusing on like safety. Cancer likes to build walls. It likes to have structure and it likes to stay within that structure. So really, I would say this weekend, maybe just kind of keep it close to home. Stay inside or maybe just hang out with people that you already know or do things that you're already familiar with. Cancer really doesn't like to take risks. It likes to feel safe and it likes to create an environment where it can be emotionally vulnerable and be open because ultimately Cancer and Pisces for that matter, the crab and the fish are very soft, at least on the inside. So they do want to be emotionally vulnerable. They want to be open, but they have to create that strong barrier, at least Cancer does, to allow for that to be safe. So that's kind of the focus. And then coming back to that Mercury Sun conjunction, we can be prone to burnout again. So if we are especially too involved with like analysis or a lot of details or like a lot of errands, for instance, where we're doing this thing and then that thing and it all has to be done according to a certain schedule and that's just not going to be the most rewarding thing for Saturday. I understand we all have to do what we have to do. So if you do have to do something like that where you're using your mind a lot and you have to pay attention to details or there's like a lot of errands or a lot of little tasks you have to do, I would say just give yourself mini like breaks throughout the whole thing. Allow yourself to kind of rest or if you can do it in a calming way, if you can put on some music, for instance. Music is especially rewarding and we can get kind of sucked into especially like relaxing music, I think, with these water signs. So, if you can do it in a comforting way, or if you can, allow yourself break time in between, because this to me really just looks like a time to pause and reflect, really, more so. Okay, and then let's go to Sunday, July 17th. this is probably the second most eventful day of the week. So I was just looking over my notes here. So moon continues through Pisces. Again, I really like this. It's a really fitting sign for the moon. We can be more sensitive, more emotional. Um, but this is not the kind of emotional of like being out of control emotional, like emotional outbursts or that type of thing. The moon in Pisces is well backed and grounded by the sun in Cancer. So they're kind of, I mean, they're not unified. I guess that's not the right word since they're in different parts of the chart, but they're unified in the sense that they're both exploring similar themes. And so you have this like strength and confidence that occurs when the sun and moon are in these signs. And the moon is beginning to be within orb of that trine to the sun. So that's where there's this kind of strong, steady vibe. Um, with all else being equal, this is like the best chance of everyone being in a kind of good, stable mood with this kind of dynamic between the sun and the moon. So there is all that to look forward to. We do have a couple trines. Really, it's just the sun and Mercury since they're so close still. They're both going to trine Neptune today. So this is really beautiful as well. It really kind of echoes a lot of similar themes that I already kind of talked about with the sun in Cancer and moon in Pisces. Now we have the sun and Mercury trining Neptune. So Neptune and Pisces again is going to be all about fantasy and kind of exploring fantasy. It can get psychological. It can get to like weaknesses and insecurities, but it can also be, our fantasy. So what do we aspire to? What do we dream? What are our greatest like wishes or fantasies or hopes? And all this kind of subjective, woo woo, I guess you could say, all this kind of dream world or imaginative area of our consciousness can be very valuable for gaining insight or inspiration. Can be really great for creativity, for like artistic expression, for instance. So with Sun and Mercury trining Neptune and Pisces, this shows that this is where the collective focus is drawing to. This is what we're curious about. It's what we're thinking about. So today, more than any day, we can be more reflective, more intuitive. We can, um, how do I put this? Like, I think this is really important for everyone all the time, but especially on a day like today with these aspects where, yes, we have to be in reality all the time. We have to be productive, but it's equally, if not more important, to take a rest. We sleep every day. We spend, a third of our lives in this dream time, and that's so important. And if we can incorporate, um, activities like that into our waking life as well, where we can spend time in nature, we can slow down, we can do something with our hands that allows our mind to rest. Like, I don't personally knit or sew or crochet, but I think anything like that is so valuable because not only, just doing something with your hands like cooking or writing, it creates this like synergy, I guess, between your mind and your body where you can kind of just kind of go into the zone as they call it. And when you enter those slow, relaxed states of mind, that's where you integrate things, you build your intuition, and you can connect with something larger than yourself, which has always been a mystery to us how that exactly works. But that's where we could get inspiration. Ideas can be fed to us, whether that be from God or the ether or aliens or whatever you believe in. There's information, there's like wisdom that's just handed down to us from nowhere if we allow ourselves to go into those slower states of mind. So I think, I like to always preach that, but even if you're going to ignore that most of the time, Sunday would be a really great day to relax, and it's kind of perfect for a Sunday for a weekend anyway. Um, that's what I'd really recommend today, and that's going to be so important too for this phase in general that we have between May and November, allowing ourselves to relax and to unwind because that's ultimately what you have to do to prepare for the intensity that will inevitably come around the corner. Sunday, we also finally have Venus entering Cancer, so it looks like it happens, p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the later part of the day. So again, that just shows our desire, our attraction is shifting from the more mentally stimulated energy of Gemini into the more emotional Cancer. So we're wanting things that are familiar to us. We're desiring interactions with people that are already familiar or pastimes that we already know and love. that's pretty much what I have for you guys. So kind of a mixed bag. Like on the one hand, it's so ordinary and it's, a time to relax. There's not much going on, but there are like little hints of, I think, much larger cycles that are still churning and turning and changing in the background. So definitely interesting time still for sure. Stay tuned next week, or check back next week, I guess. We have Chiron turning retrograde at 16 degrees of Aries, so that's gonna be really interesting. Always fun to interpret Chiron. It's such a little weirdo. And then we also have the Sun entering Leo next week already. I feel like Cancer season flew by. But that'll be nice. I mean, Leo season's kind of a crowd pleaser, I would say, for most of us. So yeah, I really hope you're doing well. I hope you are, utilizing these constantly changing energies as best you can here. But thanks for tuning in, and I will see you later.